Today's episode, I wanted to do a testing-centric episode for a while because I still remember when a company I was at a long time ago was, air quotes, going agile. The way that they decided they were going to go agile was they, meaning the development team, meaning basically the person in charge of development at the time. We'll use that title. That's
yes, I like that title.
That's a great charge. The person in charge of development at the time decided we are agile now because agile is made for developers. And he came out and said, well, we're not going to do project plans anymore, and we're not going to do requirement documents anymore. And everything we were doing back in the day, back in the hardcore waterfall days that a company would do, went off and fired the documentation guy because development paid for the documentation guy out of their budget. So we're not going to document it anymore. We're agile now. That's what agile means.
Nice. What can go wrong?
Yeah, that was the way it was rolled out. I know.
Yes.
So my initial steps into the world of Agile were very unsure, and a very rocky footing. That's where we'll kick it off. So from a testing perspective, when they came in and said, "Oh, we want to be Agile for the first time," in retrospect, I could have gone back in time and they could have just cut their whole QA department to say, like, especially if somebody went to a Scrum, like a CSM class, right, and got out of that class, well, you don't have testers in your development teams in Scrum. You just have developers, and they should have the skill set to do testing. Some development-centric person might get it in their head just based off of what's written down in the book, purely letter of the law, to say, well, I'm going to fire my documentation guy. I'm going to fire my whole QA department because Scrum says I don't need him. My developers can do the testing.
Right. So, yeah, you're right. Somebody could take that and say, hey, developers, just develop it right so we don't need to test. And if you fail to do that, we'll fire them too. Yeah, I mean, this could this could implode pretty quickly. So the term development team no longer just means developers.
Yeah. But
back when we're referring to the timeline here, that wasn't the case. So yeah, it's easy to misconstrue in that way what the roles are of different team members on a quote unquote development team, which of course now includes the testers. But yeah, so the developers doing testing. So if you write a piece of code, everybody knows this. If you write a piece of code and you test it, you're not the best person to test it. Your blind spot is just so wide at that point.
Hopefully everybody knows it.
Right? Yeah, everybody should know that. Yeah, your blind spot is so wide, you're going to miss what really should be tested, which is around the stuff that you can see. Mm-hmm. So, of course, you need to have testing, right? Testers specialize specifically in testing, but they're also technical. So they understand how developers work. Ideally, they should be collaborating together throughout the sprint instead of doing this little, well, we see this all the time, little mini waterfall. Development happens in the sprint, and then usually on the last day, they throw it over the wall to the testers, right?
Yeah, that was a team I was on. That was their complaint pretty much the whole time I was at the client. They never got over development would develop something, and then at the last day of the sprint, they'd send they use PBIs, right? It's stories, whatever. They would send many pieces of functionality over to the test team on the last day of the sprint in order to claim that they were done, air quotes done. We went through a few retrospectives so I could help them understand you can't call something done at a team level and start communicating it outside the team as done if it's not tested. That's part of our definition of done. We would create a definition of done. It also helped at that client that I somehow ended up the JIRA administrator. So I changed the done column to not be done anymore. I don't remember what it was. It was like development complete or something. I don't remember.
I'd be tempted to rename it to almost done.
Almost done. Nearly done.
Yeah, nearly done.
Every column could be renamed to some deviation of done. Close to done, nearly done, almost done.
But that's okay, because that team could say, look, development's done. All those stories that cannot be tested on the last day, we'll just create testing only stories in the next sprint.
Yeah. I feel that's probably what a lot of team members who are part of a development team in companies have gone through agile transformations. That's probably what they're doing, and they're kind of just living with it, thinking, this is agile. Like, this is what agile is. Well, no, it's not what agile is.
This is fragile agile.
Yeah, it's not what agile is. I mean, the best teams that I've encountered, here is basically what their setup looks like. They go into their sprint planning. I mean, even before sprint planning, I guess, that when the story gets created in the first place and the team is in the room, ideally the team is in the room, or let's pretend the team is in the room. I'll go through two scenarios. When the story is created in the first place and the team is in the room, the team will talk about how it's going to be tested in addition to how it's going to be developed when the team starts talking about how, right? Not the what, talking about the how right now, right? So assuming that all the proper what is being brought to the team, then the team can take it and talk about how they're going to develop it, how they're going to test it, how they're going to make sure it meets their definition of done. The other side of that is I've also been on teams where those kind of higher level discussions are done at like a product backlog refinement away from the general team, and like maybe just the leads or a key team member or whatever is brought to those. So then those teams end up doing everything I just described previously. They end up doing that in the sprint planning. You probably have your own preferences. I kind of like getting all that stuff done and out of the way in the backlog refinement. So you need to have the team there to do that.
Yeah, I fully agree. Yeah, so some teams will do that first event and they'll just call it something like pre-refinement or something like that. And then they'll mark all those stories that come out of that meeting, refinement ready, and then they'll have refinement with the actual team. Right. I feel like there's some waste there because even if you have the leads in there, you have the tester in there at least, or a test lead, right? You have to have some representation from testing, and then some representation from development. Your BAs are in there. Half the team's already there almost. Right. So I feel like if that same set of people are also in that secondary meeting, it's a waste. So I agree with you. I much prefer to have just one meeting with everybody in it. And then the other thing I like to do is just reserve the last few minutes of that meeting to estimate that which has been refined in that hour or hour and a half or whatever it is. So let's say you refine 3 or 4 stories, right? Before that meeting ends, I like to just get into an estimation session and get those estimated because they're top of mind already. And that prevents the scenario where when you separately go in and say, oh yeah, these need to be estimated, let's go in. Inevitably someone says, what was that again? Can you remind us about that again? So again, that's waste, right?
Yeah, the more time passes between talking about an item and estimating the item and then working on the item, the more points of failure you're basically building into your process there. Right? The most efficient way is to talk about it, plan how you're going to generally do the work, because obviously the sprint planning is where you're going to really get deep down, but generally talk about how you're going to do the work and then give an estimation. Where would you ideally do estimation? Would you like to have that done as part of the backlog refinements, or would you wait until the sprint plannings to do estimation?
That's a great question. So, again, everyone's got their own views, right? So I prefer to get it done at the tail end of backlog refinement, but that's not cast in stone. Meaning, in sprint planning, we look at those numbers again and say, last time we thought it was about this big. Is that still correct? Because we may have learned something new. And we're at liberty to change it. Feel free. If it was a 3-pointer, now we've learned about some dependency or complexity, then that's fine. Just raise it to whatever you think is appropriate. Maybe it's a 5 now. The second pass helps, I think, but not having anything going into sprint planning, you get the wide variations, right, between different team members.
I kind of favor putting something on it in backlog refinement so that at least you have some kind of forecast going into sprint plannings. Or before you even get to sprint planning, you have some sort of forecast that you're looking at that your product owner can say, well, it looks like we can get this done in 3 sprints or whatever. Whereas if you don't estimate anything until I took over a team once where they didn't do any estimation until they got the sprint planning. So the only things that were outside of their existing sprint that were not estimated are things that got kicked out of their existing sprint and didn't get picked up.
It makes it difficult for the product owner for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you can make the case of, when you have flow metrics that are based on story flow, like you don't really care then that you still have metrics. Yes, I mean, that's true, but you could do both as well.
You could. And for projection purposes, it's fine to have maybe 2 sprints or maybe 2.5, 3 sprints of work estimated. And those estimates, again, aren't cast in stone. So as long as everyone understands that these numbers are guides more than anything, especially if they're beyond the existing or the very next sprint, things are still a little fuzzy, and we're at liberty to come back and update those estimates.
Yeah.
But it allows the product owner to make those projections.
Yeah, I want to come back to my story that I started with
please.
The company moved over to, air quotes, being agile, and said that, we don't need documentation, because that really was the way that they transitioned to agile. And one of the things that happened when they did that was the QA team moved from being a component team to being basically broken apart. The whole QA team, air quotes team, it was still a QA team, meaning like I don't want to use any kind of specific terminology to describe it. They were like a collection of people with like skill sets.
That's a great description.
Yeah, a collection of people with similar skill sets. And they were embedded in the individual feature delivery teams for the different products. We had a couple different product lines. So one product line had 2 people, another product line only had 1 person, another product line had like 0.5 people. So the QA team started getting broken up into which QA member service what team. The point to talk about here is moving your company from component teams to integrating your people into feature teams. So there's a couple different ways we could tackle this. We could either talk about what that transition looks like, what you looked like before, and how you get to actual feature teams, which probably would be good, but it's kind of outside the bounds of testing. But for what I went through in testing, I saw a real issue with this. I think I was either the test lead or I had just been made manager. I don't remember what I was at the time when we went through this, but I had a real problem with this because all the different product lines kind of integrated together at one point. So all the product lines, they were different product lines, but all the backends and all the database and all the backend architecture and everything was the same. And I had a problem saying that one person on a QA team was only ever going to work on the mobile front end or the web front end or whatever, because that's what development was kind of pushing me for at the time. They're like, well, agile teams means that one person stays on the team and they don't go to any other team. They don't move around from team to team. And I kind of pushed back on them in that instance. I remember pushing back on them to say, if you put one person on just purely mobile testing, then, for example, their skill at testing, I don't know, API functionality or whatever, when a new server component is rolled out, will suffer because they're never going to get into testing that realm because you want them to test the mobile client, basically.
Yeah, so I think we're kind of talking about, making team members T-shaped rather than I-shaped,
yeah,
right? The other thing you have to think about is from their point of view, it behooves them to be able to work on different areas of the product so they don't get bored. It's a similar conversation to a developer working just on production support issues, right? They're going to get jaded pretty quickly because they're not working on something new, and after a while, it just becomes rote. So yeah, I agree. I think when you have an integrated product, then you have to look at it holistically and say, does it make sense for someone to see the other sides, all the different sides, and keep moving those people around a little bit, despite the fact that, they are an expert, in quotes, in their own area. They can still be valuable by learning those other things in case they need to pitch in and help, right? The other thing where it helps, specifically bringing us back to the testing arena, is if they're aware of how, as you were saying, API testing or website testing when they're doing just, mobile, right? Those kinds of things. If they're aware of how the product as a whole works, right, then it has an impact, a positive impact, I believe, right? In that they can be more thorough in not only their own areas of testing, but they can be questioning things like what's the impact of, including a new feature? How is it going to impact these other areas? You may be okay in yours, but so I think overall there's benefits to be had if you move people around in different areas of an integrated product.
Part of the problem that I had at the time, it was unique to that company, but I think it's probably not unique to what other teams are dealing with, was the development management at the time kind of was dictating what to do because they basically own the budget. I've said that many, many times on the podcast before, that's why it was a terrible situation. But for example, they would add a new feature to the mobile application, right? So you'd have a mobile app on your phone and you'd click something and something new would happen, right? In order to implement anything new in a mobile application, you need to implement some kind of API backend or something like that to handle the request and response. So the team doing the mobile application should have done both the client side and the server side. It should have been one team, and they should have had a back end engineer working on the server who could talk directly to the mobile engineers that were just working on the phones.
Yeah, I mean, there are other examples like that. So what if you have an iOS developer who has absolutely no idea about how the product behaves on the Android platform? That's okay, because they're really only working on iOS. But what if they knew a little bit about what the ramifications are of a common code base? Hopefully there's a common code base and not separate code bases for each form factor, right? Like phones, tablets, etc. Hopefully they're doing responsive design and stuff like that. But yeah, I think overall you really do need to circulate people around for a little bit. Give them a sabbatical for a bit and ask them if they'd like that. Yeah. Some people may not be comfortable with that.
Well, the componentization, is that a real word?
Componentization, yeah.
Okay, yeah, the componentization that had taken place from previous when the company was waterfall, that kind of thinking coupled with, again, development's mismanagement of the situation led to, we have the mobile client people are on one team and the testers for the mobile clients are on one team, and then the back end guys are on another team. That was contributing to it, right? Because it would have been less of a concern in this particular example. I don't know why I'm picking apart my own example. It would have been less of a concern in this example if the team had an iOS developer, an Android developer, a tester, and a full stack backend engineer. Full stack backend engineer did the database work and wrote the API endpoints that needed to be, created, new endpoints basically, and modified endpoints to, whenever it needed to be modified. And then the front end guys did the front end work, and then the QA engineer that was on the team basically, or you could make the case to have an analyst and an engineer, two QA people basically, one doing automation, 100% automation, because as soon as the backend engineer hands over the new API endpoints, they should go right into some kind of automated battery of tests, basically, in addition to whatever the software engineer on the team is doing for their own unit tests.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, that very rarely happened in that team.
It's not just that team, I don't think.
Yeah.
I've seen other teams with the same dilemma.
What would have been better for them would have been to take everyone that it required to knock out a product line, one product line in its complete capacity for a client, front end, back end, server, testing, everything involved in that, and just put them on one team, and just see how big that team got. Now I know why they would have never done that, because it was, again, it was a small company and they like to interchange people between product line to product line. The real ask of what they were asking for, this story got really long. They were asking for the testers to be segregated by product line, but they didn't want to segregate the developers by product line. They wanted the developers to be fluid and move around from product line. And not the front end developers, only the back end developers. That's what they wanted.
Yeah, I mean, So one of the things I've seen, especially with small companies, is putting testers on multiple product lines or multiple teams. Yeah. Even, right? And that's just craziness. But I've seen that. In your spare time, do this. Theoretically, you're 50-50. You're 50% on this product, 50% on this product, and in real life, you're 70-70.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that was. The more senior you get in almost any organization. When I was at very large firms, their leads would all work 60 hours, I would say probably 55 minimum hours a week, every single one of their leads. And not because they had to, no one was forcing them to, but that's just what it took to get things that they were assigned to them accomplished at the end of the day. We did an episode on leads, didn't we? Like what it takes to be a good lead or something like that, how to identify
We did
good
a
leads.
segment. I don't know if it was a whole episode, but we certainly had that topic hashed out at one point.
Yeah, we probably could revisit that from the perspective of here's some things to do to be a better lead.
Yeah, if we're done with this topic, I wanted to kind of put a cap on it by
done with every topic.
Asking a question about testers. Right? We talked about where should Scrum Masters be under or product owners be under, but what about testers? Right? Where should testers be under? Yeah. So ultimately, why are they there? They're trying to vet the product for quality, right? Mm-hmm. And you're delivering to the business. So I'll just put it out there. Should testers be under the business rather than development.
Yeah, they should definitely be under the business. Now let's nitpick that. What about automation engineers? Automation engineers basically they're like developers.
They have developer skills, but they're still improving the quality of the product.
Right.
So I still make a case for that. Them as well as manual testers, everybody who's in QA as the umbrella term, right? I think they should be under the business because they're serving the business ultimately anyway. Mm-hmm. If you did that, think of all the benefits. There may be cons as well to that. But I haven't come across too many cons except for trying to figure out budget-wise how to do that, like moving people, from one budget line to another. But that's something that can be overcome very easily. You've got your development management. They may not be happy to let go, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But again, that can be encouraged.
The issue that I ran into eventually, it was not this way for a while until some factors in the company changed, or the culture of the company changed, basically. But it was not this way for a while. At one point, we truly were a team where people could question things, and it wasn't taken as an attack or anything like that, right? But when I found all the testers under development's hierarchy, managerial hierarchy, then I started seeing that questioning why we were doing things a certain way was perceived as an attack, but was perceived as being disloyal to the development teams.
Yeah, and I can see how it would precipitate that way. I can also see from the business perspective somehow feeling a greater level of comfort because it's quote unquote their people vetting the product as opposed to trusting the pointy heads to do it. I haven't seen any organizations that I've come across have testers under the business. I think it would be a neat little experiment to try out one time, maybe just for one team, and see how that goes. One thing that I just thought about this, right, as I'm kind of saying this, where it would really help is in your BAT, because it would almost, not quite, but almost eliminate BAT because it's been happening organically throughout if the testers are under the business. Maybe you'd still have to have that as as an exercise, but it would be a lot less intense and possibly even less time consuming.
We should do the evil version of this podcast where we just tell
let's
people.
Do it.
We just create the playbook of how to, as your development teams, take over your company so that you never get questioned about anything. Yeah, the evil Agile podcast. I like it.
Let's do it.
We should just rebrand. We should just rebrand. It'd be super quick. I can just spray paint evil across the Agile podcast, and then it'll be the evil Agile podcast.
I love it.
Yeah. Because there's got to be a playbook. Like the playbook has got to start with pushing your team away from your users, so that you're blanketing. You're not blanketing. You're
insulating.
Yeah, you're insulating them from that feedback. Yeah. So they have to go through you to get that user feedback, and then you just tell them whatever you want.
That's perfect.
So in that instance, I like your suggestion, Om, but I'm gonna have to say I know what's best for the users. They told me they didn't like that. Just trust me.
Yeah, exactly. I like that idea of doing those podcasts though, like almost like the Dilbert themed ones.
Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah. I had a point to dig into this, but I can't remember what it was. So I feel like we're on track for a normal podcast. It seems like when you come in and you say, okay, we're going to be agile now, what it probably sounds like to a lot of testers is, look, we're going to fire all the testers, right? And we're going to fire all the testers, or we're going to disband the QA team, and you're all going to work for development now, and you're all going to be on development teams, and you're not going to have a QA department. Every development team is going to have a QA team member. So why wouldn't I put you under the banner of development? Basically, there's a lot of generalizations that I just threw out there that are like probably a ridiculous number of generalizations I threw out there. Number one, the people that you hire in to work for the development department. And when I left the company had this issue after I left, which was the people that were hired to do the job of QA and testing. Those are different types of people than you hire to do the jobs of software engineering. You want someone who basically has like the skill set of a BA or a PO. You want someone that is constantly asking why, and is going to pin you down and make you, and is going to vet out of you whether you actually know what the user wants and what the business wants, with the why of why you're developing a feature. Okay. And you want to bring in somebody who is going to keep asking you why until you give them a real answer. Is not going to let go until you give them a real answer. That is not appreciated.
No, it isn't. Especially if you put that person under the business, and now it becomes adversarial, right? Now it's that us and them thing, and that's probably why QA are nested under devs.
That's probably why a lot of development management would fight tooth and claw to not have the testers go over to be under the business, because they don't want to have that adversarial relationship with the test team. They don't want to. I'll go here. They don't want to potentially extend the adversarial relationship they already have with the product teams and with the business people, the direct customer-facing people, to extend that to the testers as well.
Yeah, I suspect you're right. My way of thinking is, instead of thinking about it as extending or like prolonging this relationship, right? Think about it as partnering with them. Think about it that way, right? It's so that whole us and them, that we really need to dismantle that, like yesterday.
I mean, again, not to keep beating this horse over and over again, but you either have that mindset of anyone questioning or challenging my work is take it personally type of mindset, or you don't.
Right.
Like that's a tough one. Again, we're back up here in management territory.
Yeah.
I would say training is a huge deal when it comes to this. The example that I've used at the beginning of the podcast, where a developer comes in, or a lead developer or development manager or whatever comes in and says, we're going to go Agile now because I heard that Agile is a way that's what's new and cool, and that's what all the cool new kids are doing these days or whatever. And okay, cool. What does that look like? And then to train all of your team members of now what they're, what's going to be required of them, what their new job roles and responsibilities are going to be. And then to train their managers, right? Because, you could come in the way that these guys came in and fired the documentation guy and, moved QA underneath development because now they're not a separate organization before. But I don't think that's the right way to go about it. The right way to go about it probably would be to start with training, to teach everyone what the fundamentals are.
Yeah, and that's really lacking quite evidently out there as well. As people just aren't doing the fundamentals right.
It helps you understand that those team members with that specific skill set should be passing that skill set along to anyone whose team they're on. And that's how your team basically grows that cross-functionality within themselves. I feel that's probably, like, out of all the teams and all the companies that I've been at, this is probably the one that is kind of lost in translation about agility the most. Is anybody you add to your team or that you put on your team, the concept there is that the whole team learns from that person and kind of absorbs the skills that they have and keeps them with the team, with the, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I just thought of another little benefit of putting testers under the business, and that's this. Say the product in question is something that's going to be released out in the wild for mass consumption outside of the organization. In that case, if you had testers on the business side, now what you've got once the product's released is internal product champions. These are the people that really understand when customers have issues, right? So they would be maybe the first or the second port of call for inbound issues from end users. And they would translate the problems to the development team that are under development management. I think that is a huge benefit. I didn't think of that.
I'm not sure if I caught your meaning. Say one more time.
Yeah, what I was thinking is this. If you have testers under the business, and then you release the product. Let's say the product is one of those mass consumption products for end users. Well, once it's out there and released and end users have issues, right? Who is prime positioned to deal with those issues, to at least to understand, not to resolve, right?
I see.
It'll be those testers.
Or can empathize better, quite honestly.
And understand that, and maybe they could act as the translators of the issue to development, right? So I wouldn't necessarily call them just testers at that point, I guess they're playing another role, maybe analysts of some kind, supporting the end users. They could be support analysts, pick your phrase. But I think that could be a huge benefit for a lot of organizations, as opposed to customers calling into somebody who is tech support and they're just going off a script, right? Is it turned on, right? That kind of thing.
Right.
I'd really like to see now that we've discussed this a little bit, I'd love to see this play out on a team where testers are under the business, even if it's just for a little while. I'd love to see what that experience is like.
Yeah. I don't know how you would measure that. You'd have to do some kind of net promoter score or something like that from the customers. How happy are you with that? You feel that the technical service that you're getting has you in mind or has you first or whatever. I mean, you hear everyone says customer first all the time.
Yeah, they do.
We're customer first, or we're customer centric, customer obsessed, whatever terms that you hear, thrown around. But it's essentially meaningless. Now, if you're going to say that you're going to deploy your real world testers that sit on your development teams, but that now that they're partnered with product, the idea is they more closely empathize with the customers and they more closely understand the customers because they're sitting with product. They're included in product's mode of thinking and product's vision. The testers are included in that. The argument I would also put out there is if you have a company where testers are kind of looked at as not like a lower tier of the product wing, but I think you understand what I'm saying. Like they're like the product would be like maybe an evolution of a tester's career or career path or whatever, as opposed to sitting underneath development. Like
where would they go?
Where are you going to go? You're never going to be a director of development from a tester. Never going to happen. So,
right.
And I would venture to guess that there are very few development departments out there that are going to be open enough with you to say, we're never going to have a tester that supervises software engineers. That's not going to happen.
No, your best bet there would be to become like a QA manager, maybe. But yeah, I agree. I think if you're blending that role of the testers who in this new world would be under the business, you're blending that role with maybe involving them in the product discussions, design decisions, things like that. They become almost like product analysts. They have a say in how the product is created from a quality standpoint.
Yeah.
So flip side of that, in the old world, we used to call those guys quality assurance, whereas what we are calling testers that are under the stereotypical development umbrella, in the old world, they were called quality control, right? They would control the quality, although you can't really control quality. It's just inspected for at the end. Yeah. But so that is a fascinating thought, though. What if you could have those guys lead with product, right, and get involved in those decisions? Because they would be interfacing with clients, understanding and empathizing with clients. Where are the issues, right? What kind of issues do the clients face? What are the real pain points? And build those into the design decisions. I think that's a great opportunity.
I think that's probably the proper place to put them, and then to try to push them to gain a lot of the BA, product owner, basically a lot of skills that set them on a path to be a product owner, / product manager at some point in time. Because basically you're going to say anytime a question is asked, what is the evidence that you back up that question with, or that response? Anytime a hypothesis is put to the organization, what is the evidence that we're going to look to back up the solution? And that's what you're training your QA / test people to do. Right. Whereas the completely opposite side of that world is on a test team is, does it meet the acceptance criteria? Well, the software developer told you it met the acceptance criteria and it's good enough, and not to dig into all these other air quotes edge cases. Who hasn't heard that a million times? Well, that's an edge case. No customer will ever run into XYZ. And you get into these little arguments that you get into, as a tester and the developer on a development team.
As you were saying that, my mind went to Chesterton's fence, right? Yeah. It's fence in the middle of a field, and the QA criteria is, does the gate open? And there's nothing else around it. So people are expected to open the gate and go through, and thinking around it, people are just going to go, I'm just going to walk around it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I really want to see this now. Now that we've spoken about this for a little bit today, I want to see this play out on a team.
Mm-hmm.
I'll see if I can create those opportunities in the field. That would be awesome. I wouldn't even know what to call this role of a, tester, because they're not just testing anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their role is now wider,
Mm-hmm.
right? I wouldn't even know what to call that. So if you have any suggestions, let us know.
I think the easier way to go about moving them out from under development and under product is to kind of target. Maybe this is not the way, but this is the only way that my brain can think of right now at this moment to pitch to get them moved over, which is the question: what is the ROI of having T-shaped team members?
Difficult to quantify, but whether the testers are under development or under product, they're essentially a cost center, accounting wise. They're not necessarily revenue generators directly.
Mm-hmm.
So what does it matter? It's just another umbrella that you're moving them to. They're still on the cost of doing business side of the equation, right? So it should not matter. But I think it's going to take somebody up on high to say we're going to do this.
Yeah, but I was thinking about that when you were talking before. There's two branches of the conversation I want to go down. One is the typical CFO thinking of like, what is the ROI in hiring another tester? They're basically asking like, well, what is the ROI? What is the cost of all these bugs that we have not detected? Is basically what they're asking, which is like, how are you going to even answer that? It's an unanswerable question.
Mm-hmm.
What is the ROI on having T-shaped team members? But also down that path is, what is the ROI on training our team members who are here? What is the ROI on sending somebody to Scrum training? I happen to think that the perfect evolution of a tester's career is you come in and start doing testing. You start doing manual testing. Maybe you're creating scripts, you're following your stories, you're figuring out how to integrate your pieces into the rest of the software. Entry-level stuff, basically, what I would think testing. And under the banner of quality is everybody's responsibility, like you become the person who seeks to learn how everyone can be doing things better, seeks to understand how the users are using the software that you don't think the users are using, so maybe you haven't thought about, seeks to look at patterns in your systems that reveal how users are using software, trends, stuff like that. And the people that do that might be the developers. Maybe the developers are looking at those trends and stuff like that, especially if the product people are really prodding them for deep metrics and statistics, stuff like that. I've been in organizations where they certainly do. But I would also argue, when we take a step back for a second, the path starts to divide between working for development and working for product, where product starts envisioning this product is great and it's keeping the lights on, and there's a certain amount of revenue coming in per user, or a certain amount of revenue coming in per business, maybe if it's B2B software coming in per business using software. So basically our revenue is growing X percentage year over year or whatever. But the product people are thinking of like, how can I leap off of this revenue line to new features? Kind of what we were talking about off camera before we started, is putting money into the features you already have versus building something new. Your development team is not bringing you those cases of where you need to build something new. That's coming from your product people.
Absolutely.
So the idea of people with this deep understanding of your products, people that could have a deep understanding of your customers, because they're basically riding along with the product people at a strategic level, right, when possible. And also, if you couple let's say if you're using Scrum, Kanban, it doesn't really matter. Whatever methodology you want to use, if we couple those skills with what we're talking about, you could start increasing and training your testers to start running facilitations, to start running your product backlog refinements, using them like BAs to basically extend your product owner. You know what I mean? And maybe your QA person can start running those types of meetings. Maybe they can start facilitating roadmap type sessions and stuff like that,
I agree, absolutely. And there's no need to limit that within the organization. Maybe what they could do is do things like annual user group meetings, and these are the people that are facilitating that with real clients in the audience, right? And listening to them and maybe asking their feedback in creating, say, a backlog of the top 10 items that the user community at large comes up with. And that's what we focus as an organization for that product line. Imagine the benefits of that. You're not producing something and saying, here guys, look at this new bright shiny thing we've come up with. See if you can have a use for that, as opposed to the customer saying, we have a crying need for this. And then you build just that. So I really don't see a downside to this, except for the political wrangling that goes on with, I have so many people under me, under my department, that kind of crap. That can be overcome with a strong leader at the top.
With a strong leader at the top, you run into the same thing, like what is the ROI for training? Like you're never going to get that. Like, why should I send any of my people for training? All the money I invest in sending my people to training, there's no ROI in that. My product numbers are not going to go up because my people know how to, know the Scrum model better or whatever. That would be, obviously I'm being ridiculous a little bit just to kind of
not a lot though.
Drive the point home, but you're not going to get, like, if you're in a management type environment where you have to pitch, I'm going to send all my people to training and I expect a 5% increase in productivity across the board within X number of weeks. That's not really the purpose of sending your people to training.
Yeah, so it's not predictive in that sense where they can say, I want 5% ROI on sending people to training, right? I mean, those are the people that need training, I believe, in a different way of working, these leadership people. But I think they need to look at the opportunity cost of not having their people trained. Look at what your competition's doing. Look at the way the landscape in your market space is changing. If you're not going to change the way you're approaching that, the same old approach, you're going to go by the way of Sears, Roebuck, Kmart. I mean, I can go on and on and on, right? So I mean, an astute leader understands that, right?
Yeah, but for me, again, the reason I brought that one up is that if I had been paying attention, like if I had listened to this podcast, and a light maybe could have gone off in my head to say, oh yeah, the organization is not sending anyone to training because no individual manager wants to pay for anyone to go to any trainings because they're afraid that they might get a skill set that could make them more valuable as a person, and then they'll leave the company. That was their thinking. Or their thinking was, I manage the software development department. Why would I send someone to PO training who's in QA? Because then if they leave or if they transfer departments to the department where all the product people are, then I've just funded training for the product department. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I think this is segueing into that whole what's wrong with the way things are budgeted today kind of subject, right? Because it's the organizational budget. It's not, it's like, do I spend from the right pocket or the left pocket? You're still spending money.
It is a systemic problem. It is a problem with the system. But if we're going to all go forward with quality as everyone's responsibility and really believe it is an organization, then wouldn't it be best to start people off with the quality mindset and then build all the rest of their skills on top of the quality mindset and then push them into the other parts of my organization? So at least I'm sure that I've got people that are willing to make these base level challenges of what customers are asking for this. How much money are we going to make off this? Is this something we can do sustainably? Is this actually feasible in the market we're moving into? Like all these real basic questions that you would get from a tester, theoretically would get from the tester. Again, pushing back hard against which I could also argue is, a typical developer looking for testers is like, look, just mark off that every one of the acceptance criteria works and the checkbox saves when I hit save, and I don't care about all the rest of this. This is all real high level, meta type stuff.
Yeah, it would be so much better to start people off with that quality mindset at the end of the day, but it's going to be hard to convince the bean counters of that for short term. Right, that short-term thinking. I'm investing X. I need X plus to come back to me.
Again, this is a finance conversation that I'm never going to have. That I want to have. They should be tied to the metrics of the product as well.
Absolutely,
they're directly controlling the funding of the product. Well, why should they not be judged by all the same metrics? The argument back there is, well, I as a finance person, I just manage dollars going into the team. Like, what?
You're a cost center too, Mr. Finance person.
How can I make any impact? Well, you make impact because you should be taking active participation into, money that's going into your product lines.
Yeah, and they're also a cost center at that point, right? No one from the customer's point of view is paying for a finance person. I mean, but they are needed, of course, right? Yeah. So it's that whole mindset thing again.
Well, that goes back to quality. Back to quality. Like, quality is the base level expectation.
Yeah. Yep.
We'll have to round back to this topic when we finally do the Deming video, which I need to read the book.
For sure.
Because that's one of the direct quotes out of his book is management can't put an ROI to training of your people in the company. You can't put an ROI to that. You can't say, well, like these silly OKRs I see companies come up with. Like, there's no OKR you can put in for training. I mean, I guess you could say make sure that everyone in my department has spent X number of dollars on training, but that's not much of an OKR because that's just you spending money.
There's no R in that. There's only the I. So
Well, the OKR in that example is all the people in my department have advanced their skill set, or we, the company, have made sure that everyone has advanced their professional set of skills while they're with us. That's the objective, right? And then the result is everyone's gone to training for, spent X number of days on training or whatever.
But it's not quantifiable.
No. That's one of those qualitative versus quantitative things. It's like, well, is the customer happy with our software? No, customer's not happy. Well, why? They've never given me a specific thing they're not happy about. I don't know. They just don't feel happy.
Right.
Well, that's garbage. That's garbage.
They don't know what they're talking about.
They don't know what they're talking about. They give me a real metric. That's not good. They're not happy. That's not a real metric. Oh, yes, it is. How they feel about it is most certainly a real metric. I feel like I should be screaming at somebody.
Scream at the people that invented those child-proof caps. You press down and then move, and so now they have easy caps for the those that are challenged.
Yeah, I believe.
Just don't let children near your home.
I feel like quality is everyone's responsibility. We're gonna come back to that one because I feel I want to make an entire podcast on what that one means. I'll probably that'll be the title of the podcast. Quality is everyone's responsibility.
I love it. Look forward to that one.
Maybe that'll be one we rebrand to be the Evil Agile podcast.
The Evil Agile podcast.
Yeah.
Quality is nobody's responsibility. Why bother with it?
Quality is everyone's responsibility. That means, and that's the hard trade-off of that one to your management. Oh, if quality is everyone's responsibility, that means nobody's responsible.
It's like this. It's everyone.
Well, that's just a manager who wants to identify themselves as not competent of understanding what that means, and not willing to do the deeper dive in the roots of manufacturing, where all these concepts come from, all the Deming philosophy and concepts come from. They're just not willing to understand that.
Dude, they need to resign and go work for a mechanistic organization.
No, they couldn't cut it at a actual production manufacturing type of organization, because they would be asking all the wrong questions.
Right, of course, right?
Yeah. So we talked about how do we get to where we're at? That's a continuing theme on the Agile podcast, right? How do we get to here?
If you can figure it out, let us know.
That's right. You let me know with all around the world. We started with what transformation that I went through looked like, what the training looked like, what the original business goals, of going through the transformation looked like, what the basically management oversight of the departments and restructure looked like, or what the team restructure looked like. But we didn't talk about automation in any way, shape, or form. And I would say we cannot get through talking about testing in Agile without dipping our toes into automation, or at least doing a swan dive into automation. And we really should have started this by saying, welcome to the Agile Podcast. This is Om. I'm Brian. If you're doing Agile testing and you're not automating, you're doing it wrong. Good night.
This is a great intro to cut and pre-pen at the beginning. I fully agree. One of the reasons why you want to automate is coming right back up to time to market. You don't have to automate. Mm-hmm. You can do everything manually, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. You just won't be releasing anything anytime soon. Then you get back to, have you missed the boat now because your competitor came in, swooped in, stole your market, stole your customers, right? And so you've got a great product, has high levels of quality but no buyers,
Right.
right? So you have to automate. There's just no ifs, buts, and ands around that one, right?
Or doesn't have high level. The example I started with here when development took over and said we're agile now, they had no automation at all in any way, shape, or form. And even when I left, we implemented automation in quite a few areas, but the QA team members, when I say team members, I mean like the people in the department who were out in the other development teams, we spent a considerable amount of time training them up and having them build a skill to be able to do and maintain automation. But if all those people left in short order and the company wasn't dedicated to maintaining that automation, they'd go right back to where they started. Everything would be manual, basically, and nobody would really care because as a company, they were not dedicated to automation.
I think this is one of those areas where, people have heard the term efficiencies of scale.
Mm-hmm.
This is squarely inefficiency of scale if you're not automating, because you really cannot get anything to market unless you're automating. I just don't see any other way around it, really. I think that you could make a case where there are some esoteric products that are, quote unquote, difficult to automate. Custom made high-end jewelry might fall into that, right? But it's custom made. Every product's unique. How are you going to automate it? You don't have to. You have to convince someone to part with a lot of cash. That's a different proposition to something that is produced, which is a software product. You kind of have to automate.
Yeah.
I think, to your point, a lot of companies are, even today, surprisingly, and here we are in 2021, almost 2022, still don't have automation to the degree they should have. Or some, very few hopefully, don't have any automation. Because it goes back to that thing. To automate, what do we need? Oh, we need people with automation skill sets. Well, they want a lot of money. And then they come in and they demand tools. And now you got to buy tools for them too. Where's my direct ROI on that? And I can't quantify it, right? Therefore, I'm not going to sanction that. This is unfortunately the world we're in. People are looking at just ROI instead of the opportunity cost of not doing it.
Why would you bring people in and not give them the tools to do the job? Like it's
right. So the easy answer is don't bring them in.
None of this makes any sense. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it'd be a lot easier just to not bring them in, and then you don't have anyone to blame. I guess I don't know where I'm going on this other than the rote road that we go down many times of, well, it's just a blame culture, and that's what blame cultures do. Right. They look to bring somebody in, and then they blame that person, and then they fire that person, and bring somebody in as their replacement, and then the cycle continues. And since their management is so terrible, they don't ever look at the right things, and they would know where the real problems are.
Right, and in the rare instance where even some of those managers are let go, or let's just go roll it up even higher, C-level staff, right? Mm-hmm. What happens? You think about what happens when somebody in a C-suite role is let go. Somebody else comes in. What's the first thing they do? They bring in a whole bunch of their posse, right? They bring in their people, that the trusted circle, so to speak, fire a whole bunch of other people and bring in that which may not be the right fit for this organization, but they do it anyway. That's just humans, right? That's just how they work. So they are doomed to repeat their mistakes at the new organization, unfortunately.
So what I've seen, just me, again, in my career, is that companies are either dedicated to automation or they are not. Actually, funny thing is my experience has been a lot like Agile. Automation has been a lot like Agile in my experience. Ooh, I actually might be making a point here. The whole podcast is going to be 3 minutes. It's going to be this point right here. In Agile, usually you have somebody at the top who really, really believes in it, and they'll come in and there'll be a real strong initiative, but the whole initiative is basically anchored around this one person, right? And then one person leaves or transfers out or does whatever, then the company's willingness to be agile, or department's willingness to be agile, or whatever segment of the organization willingness to be agile kind of goes away with them when they go away. And automation, I've seen, is pretty much the same way. When I was a manager, I was the anchoring weight to moving the whole company toward automation. And I know for a fact that after I left, they didn't basically they didn't do automation. They didn't try to maintain what we had. I don't know if they built new automation or moved it over to the development department. Now, what they did basically, but I know they didn't try to maintain all the automation initiatives that I had basically stood up.
Yeah, so I think as in other areas too, it just takes somebody to champion it, right? Mm-hmm. Evangelize it and lead by example. Unless that happens, it doesn't gain traction because it's something quote unquote foreign to the organization. It's not in their DNA, right? So therefore, it must be risky and really not convinced if it's needed.
Yeah.
But somebody comes in and says, "No, I'm going to stake my reputation, maybe my job on this, right? Yeah. And we're going to do this." Yeah. Because they have the resolve and they're convinced that's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. So when they experience that first level of success, they're going to bring in a bunch of people, right? In their kind of the draft, as I call it, right? Mm-hmm. Use a NASCAR term, but yeah. So they'll bring in people that kind of sat there thinking, this is interesting, but let's watch him do this, see if it works. I'm not sure if I believe it yet.
Yeah.
But when they see it, they go, yeah, this is interesting. I'm in. Yeah. Right. And so then it's like a snowball effect. It just builds on itself.
I would kind of take this from the perspective of saying that ground floor of quality that you need to have, that base level of quality that you need to have. Your software needs to be good. Now, air quotes, your software means a lot of things. It's a very broad category. So let me dive into that for a second. Your software meaning everything about your software, the way you roll out your software, the way you maintain your software, the way that you check in and check out your software, the way you deploy your software, basically everything, the way you test your software to include automation needs to be good. It needs to be rock solid, bulletproof, whatever, and Brian, you're asking a lot. Like, yeah, but that's the base level of quality. That's the minimum. The minimum expectation is that it works every time and never fails. That's the minimum.
Yeah, so certainly I agree with that. But then I look back at the industry right now and everything really. How many companies can say that our software is that solid, right? What they'll say is it's good enough. Yeah. Because to get to the 100% from the 90 or the 80 is going to cost us 80% more than where we're at. Mm-hmm. So they won't bother. Some call it planned obsolescence. Instead of that, we'll just come up with a brand new line and we'll just force everybody to upgrade, right? Looking at you, Apple, right? So, unfortunately, there is no holy grail unless you have a product that is going to stay the course, right? Several years, quite a few years. Unfortunately, software, just like hardware in the case of Apple, it evolves, right? You get new processors, new this, new that. So you kind of have to go with planned obsolescence, but it's not so much planned as something new came around, so we're just going to focus on that because look at all the benefits of that, right? We can fit another 3 trillion transistors per square millimeter or whatever it is. So therefore, we can take advantage of that. Whether those advantages actually result in tangible benefits for the end user is another issue. It's like, why get a 32 gigabyte RAM in your laptop, right? When you don't even know if you're going to need 32, unless you're doing real live CAD CAM stuff or whatever, your video editing, right?
Or video editing. Let me tell you about need more hardware in my laptop. Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. Like that would be the normal business pushback of like, well, it's the 80-20 rule. Like, well, we'll come 80% to the solution. Yeah, I understand, but my challenge to that is where you're doing the 80-20 solution should not be in the stability of your application. Where you're doing the 80-20 should be of like, we want to build 80% of the features or execute 80% of what customers are asking us to do or whatever. It should be in the realm of delivering things to the customer, not our application runs 80% of the time and 20% of the time it crashes.
Dude, they call that beta.
Oh, man. Om is trolling me right now. That's what's happening right now in this topic. I think we're kind of spinning around this conversation over and over again. And I think the point of us spinning around this drain is I have observed that a company is either dedicated to automation or not, and I've not observed it in between.
Yeah, it's almost like those people that are pursuing fitness. They're either dedicated or they're not. You got people that say, I don't feel like exercising today. I'm just going to watch my diet. Yeah, you kind of have to do both, right?
Yeah.
For long-term, success. So it's sort of like that. I agree. But I think from an organizational standpoint, and speaking for the bean counters, they're going to look at this and go, we don't want to be the absolute best there is. We just want to be good enough to capture X% of the market. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's the space we're playing in.
Yeah, I would tell those people they don't have any input into how we deploy our applications. In a typical finance person's viewpoint, all my developers are paid on salary. So it doesn't matter if those developers work 38, 39, 40 hours a week, or if they work 60 hours a week. They get paid the same at the end of the day. So they could care less. So whether I have fully automated pipelines that automatically roll back when a failure happens so that none of my customers are ever impacted, or if I have pajama party rollouts in the middle of the night, finance person doesn't care at all.
You're right. Unfortunately, that's true because they probably don't even understand the difference.
No, and you know what? I would argue they don't want to understand. They got all kinds of stuff in their head. It's kind of like what I go through when I try to do any kind of exercise in programming. I'm like, don't talk to me about virtual environments. Like, I'm just trying to make the program work. Just to get my one little thing, working. I don't care about checking my stuff into Git. I don't care about version control. I just want my code to work.
Right.
That's all. That's all I care about.
Yeah.
But then again, I am not writing production code that users are using. I'm writing little tools and applications for myself. If I was writing them for another user to pick up, like for example, I was telling Om, for people listening to this, I was writing a little Python script that will automatically upload my videos to YouTube and enter all the information I need to do it so I can decrease my steps, become a bit more efficient with my podcast editing and uploading and management, basically. Because in addition to creating a title and a description, there's also uploading the audio version, uploading the video version, and then to send out a LinkedIn post that says, hey, the new video is up, both on the LinkedIn page for the Agile podcast as well as to promote it with my personal. All that stuff can be done with a Python script. So with basically one click, I can automate the whole thing, which would be really sweet. It would save me a bunch of time. Now, if I were to teach somebody else how to do the video editing, all I would have to do is have a shared folder with the Python script or whatever, shared Git location, whatever, somewhere they can get the Python script. And then they would be able to run the Python script themselves and do everything that I can do. I'm not saying I want to. I'm very, very happy with the way things are right now. But if I ever wanted to in the future, I could not because everything is on me. So what I'm saying is like you figure out the absolute basics of what you're doing first, and then you build everything on top of that. We beat this topic down pretty well. We did not get into BDD or TDD.
Oh yeah, that's in testing world too, I heard.
Well, the problem is like you have to assume that your company is 100% in on automation, has gone 100% in. Okay, so no, we're making a decision. We're going to be agile now. We're going to break up our old component QA development teams, and now we're going to have product feature teams. And some of my teams might have a tester and an automation engineer. Some of my teams maybe you'll only have one. It really depends. You know what I mean? But then now that we're 100% in on automation, how are we going to do automation? Well, the easy way is to move to BDD, so that all of your requirements when they're written, all of your stories when they're written, are automatically in the language that you're using to test with. So if everything's already, if you can get your business people, your product people, your teams, basically everyone who writes stories, PBIs, whatever you want to call them, to write in this language, your dedication to automation has now taken the step to another level because the code is already written in the way you need it written, basically.
Right. No, that's very true. But having said that, in the real world, I haven't seen too many product owners who write stories adopt this approach because their mindset doesn't work that way. Yeah. So where we can really help is the BAs could pair up with the product owners and say, this is how we used to write things. Mm-hmm. This is how we need to. And it's not a huge shift, to be honest. Mm-hmm. It's almost like just using the new vernacular. It's a new way of thinking, but not radically new. I think they can easily easily come on board if they were just encouraged to do that.
If you're at a organization that does not have BAs, like we were talking, the organization I was talking about before, they never had BAs ever. It was the QA people basically that were doing that work.
So they need to pair it with the product. See, this is what I'm saying, right? If somebody needs to just basically stay with them and say, here's what we used to do, this is what we need to do, and that delta is not huge.
Mm-hmm. No, I would say, and I would also argue that having the test person on the team also do the work of what you would think of a business analyst, that's not a huge step, I would argue. I mean, your PO should have those skills to be able to do that kind of stuff. PO, product manager, whatever you want to do, should have the skill to do that stuff. But if the test person already has those skills or is gaining those skills, that'd be a huge benefit to your organization.
So in practice, how this might look is a tester would be involved at the time of creating the story or shortly after, just transforming the way it's laid out into BDD format.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah, right.
And they could then be the person who explains the story to the team because now they've understood it themselves.
Right.
Almost really doing away with the need for a BA, to be honest. I mean,
right. Yeah. Well, you're just again going on the model where we're distributing those skill sets. Maybe you have a BA or two in your organization that, if they're free to do their general BA tasks of bringing in high-level requirements out from you, vetting requirements out from users. I don't like to use the word requirement in this. We're muddying the waters up, but they're conducting user interviews and workshops and they're observing what users are doing and kind of riding along with product and kind of vetting things out. Maybe they have those high-level facilitation skills. Maybe they have the skills of building a roadmap and building that high-level, like the old project managers used to use BAs to build the skeleton of a project at a high level before the teams were even involved. So right. Discovery work. They're doing discovery work. You know?
Yeah, the solicitation. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. They can certainly do that. I think there's a place for that set of skills, which is not to be confused with anyone in the testing world who is thinking about formulating requirements in a BDD format. Mm-hmm. Those skills that we just talked about, solicitation skills, elicitation, you call it what you want. Yeah. Those skills are different because it requires you to think like the users. It requires you to really empathize with them, work with them, make suggestions, capture those thoughts, wishes, desires, all of that. Mm-hmm. Those are different. So there is definitely a case for having somebody there. You could also argue the flip side, which is maybe a good product owner, product manager is already fulfilling that role. Right? They'd be operating at more of almost like a tactical level more than a strategic level. But yes, that can also be the case depending on the organization. Yeah,
I'm going to go ahead and say that my pitch, and again, my pitch is not, I don't know if this scales well, so we can shoot holes in this one, but my pitch in this discussion is let your testers on the team gain the BA skill set and let your testers on the team be responsible for the process. So whether you're using a Scrum model or whatever, you send them to training for the process. So basically, your testers come up through the teams with the quality mindset first, or you're hiring in for quality mindset first. You're teaching them test and analytical skills, right? And then they start adding skills from there on top of their already base skill set of quality. And the skills they're adding on top of that is either the ability to do business analysis work, deep business analysis work, process type skills, so Scrum Master type skills, facilitation, that kind of stuff, and or quality engineering. Because you at some point you diverge. Once you have that base skill set, you start diverging to say, do I want to go down the people route, or do I want to go down the more development centric, software developer in test type of route. But that base level skill set is required first before you go down any of those career paths.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think you could even kind of start to bring in your tech leads in this as well. Why shouldn't they have a quality mindset and think about the same things you just talked about? Have a quality mindset, start thinking about empathizing with the client, start thinking about formulating requirements and understanding them and distributing those in like almost a BDD format, and rather than just focus on the, if this then that sort of thing, right? I mean, because that's what happens all the times. You fit acceptance criteria in based on what you think you're going to do. So as soon as you say, okay, it's met those, you say, well, I'm done, right? Yeah. And then the tester in the sort of the old way of thinking is going to go, yeah, it does what you say it does, and that's that. I used an example in the past about a light switch because it's as binary as it gets, right? Mm-hmm. Lights are either on or off. Well, what happens occasionally, you may have seen this, occasionally you turn the light switch on and it flickers. Is that on or off? Yeah. Well, it's both. So what do you do, right? So does it pass the ACs? It says when I flip the light switch, you should turn it on. Well, flip it which way? Well, first of all, but then when you do it, it's turning on and off because you've got a short in the system somewhere maybe. You got a light bulb that's failing. A quality mindset is going to say, does it fulfill the need, which is I need to turn the light on and therefore it should stay on, right? That's the expected outcome here, right? Rather than, it turned on and it's off again, but I'm only testing for it to be turned on. So it's passed. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, it sounds asinine, but teams operate this way, and I've seen that. It's, when you come in from the outside and you look at it and you go, yeah, sure, you've checked the boxes, but this is no good, right? From a user standpoint, this is no good. It's going to come back, and when it comes back, it doesn't come back simply as a user-reported bug. It comes back as that, but also with the reputation damage that goes with it. You release something in the wild and it didn't work.
Right.
So,
You just triggered a memory of going back and forth with development about this doesn't work. Like, but only that one customer found it. And like basically a discussion of what is the impact of not fixing it. And even though a customer found it, is it really important? That kind of stuff. Efficiency conversations, rather than effectiveness conversations.
I call them convenience conversations, right? It only happens on a leap year. So, we'll hear about it. We know in 4 years or 3, whatever, right? We're not going to do anything about it. It's a convenience conversation.
Yeah, well, those are the conversations when you're a tester and you're trapped under development. Those are the conversations you get caught in because you had competing
interests.
Yeah, competing interests. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and then of course it's compounded by this whole pressure to release and all that stuff. But if that tester though, right, in question right now, if that tester was on the product side or on the business side, just think how different that would go down. Yeah. Right? It would not be the same. It would be slightly different, I would say, right? And for the better, for the organization as a whole. Yeah.
Well, that's the testing conversation. All right. Well, thank you, Om. I want a special thanks to the mop back there who's back in the background.
All right, guys. Listen, thank you for hanging in with us. And let us know if you want us to tease out other subjects and what you think of what we've been rambling on about down there. Smash that like button.
Oh, unless you're listening on audio. Is there a like button on the audio?
I don't know. Don't smash your phones if you're listening on audio.
Then smash that phone. So I was laughing because I was thinking of like our iOS guy specifically. He was like, I don't know SQL. I don't know anything about SQL. You never touched it. I'm like, dude, you're a developer. How do you not know anything about SQL? Oh, man. I remember him sitting with the QA guys, and the QA guys are teaching him SQL. He was like, I don't understand why I would ever need to know this. Like, why do I ever need to go to the database? I'm like, dude, how you test that your stuff works, man? Yeah, real funny. Anyway, I might cut that whole story out because it's, it's ridiculous randomness of my memory.